Um, yeah, so I mean, the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about, getting back to Strangers on a Train, was really how much of this was done. I think Hitchcock really blended the practical and the special effects in this movie really well. Obviously, like the CG wasn't what it is now by any means. Vertigo, like we talked about, was the first time there's a computer animated, sequence in a movie. Or was it just like an animated sequence, something like that? I don't know. But I think the best version of that was when he's strangling Miriam, and it's like shown in the glasses and the reflection.
Yeah.
And that was actually done with like this huge mirror, in a studio that they just like, they filmed it through that and then, superimposed it over the glasses. I guess they did like 7 takes because she kept falling too fast. He kept telling her to like float to the ground. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't float. So I guess on the 7th take, they finally got it. And he was like, cut, next shot. And they just like moved on. And I guess like she was pretty beat up from falling like 6 times before that. But and then the special effects of using the carousel with like the rear projection. I guess they had filmed like a toy carousel kind of going off the rails. And that's what they had shown in there. But I just wanted to have a little discussion about our feelings of like the practical effects versus the digital effects. The first one, the main one I ever think of is Star Wars. I think that's just kind of a difference in the feeling of like the original trilogy and the prequels, like we talked about. In our next week's episode, our May the 4th episode coming out, we talked about that a little bit, and even the practical use, like in Lord of the Rings, with the Force perspective of Gandalf just being huge, but really it's just like the way that they had set Frodo far away. But I don't know. I think it's cool, like the magic that you can pull off inside the camera lens. Matt, I kind of wanted to throw to you to kind of get your thoughts on, the practical versus the special effects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of like really, I really admire really well done special effects. CGI, like I love it when there's a really great like leap forward or accomplishment in CGI. I feel like the film industry jumped way too early into it. They got way too confident in it in like the mainstream, like in the front, I guess in the foreground of their movies. But if for Stranger on a Train, I think they used like their trick photography like super well. And when it comes to practical effects, I feel like there's an integrity that it brings for the audience and for the actors. I feel like actors are able to interact with it better. It's more believable for them. And the more bought in they are, the more bought in we are. And then even in the trick photography instances where like, okay, they're maybe acting 15 feet apart to have like one appear taller than the other, at least the audience sees like the real physics, the real lighting, and there's less gymnastics that you have to put together. Like even when something's done really well, sometimes it just feels off and you don't know why. And you maybe don't even consciously recognize it, but that will sit with you. And so with practical effects, you don't have that, and you just get to sit back and enjoy it. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said, especially like with the way that your brain perceives what you're watching when it's real versus digital. And it reminds me a lot of the argument between 24 frames and 34 or 30 frames per second. And I know Tarantino, I think, has like a talk where he talks about the dreamlike nature of 24 frames per second because there's a little bit of motion blur and stuff. And I think it's a similar concept to practical versus digital effects, a lot like you were saying, Matt, because you get the real physics. You don't have to try and match the lighting. The lighting is matched, and the actors, there's like a tangible connection because the actors are in the room together versus staring at a tennis ball or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think our brains are good at picking that up, whether it's subconsciously or consciously. I think you can tell when something is real, versus, digitally imposed. With that said, there are times that I can remember, like we just went and saw Jurassic Park. All 4 of us were there, and those like the dinosaurs, the CGI dinosaurs still look incredible. And I know they used a mix of like puppetry and animatronics as well as CGI. It still looks really good. And in the moment when I saw it, I thought those giant T-Rexes, I thought they were giant animatronic puppets.
Yeah.
I really did. I didn't know they were CGI until I saw it this last weekend. So there's times when it works. I think the Marvel movies do a really good job. It's one of my favorite things about them is the fact that, you know, the people that grew up loving comic books so much finally get to see it be real, you know, and it feels real and it looks real and it's believable beyond, like, you know, Superman obviously just sitting on his stomach on a stool and having a wind blow his cape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so there's times that it works and there's times that it holds up. I just think it's really hard to do. And I think I just think, you know, if the more that we can keep things practical and tangible and real, I think we're better for it. But I agree with Matt that, like, CGI is great for backgrounds and finishing touches and, you know, that sort of thing. But when the CGI is supposed to be the main object, I think it's where it gets a little wonky.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a less is more situation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, the movie that I'm thinking of when we're talking about this is Eternal Sunshine.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of that stuff I was done, like, on set and, you know, in camera. And you know, Matt mentioned that it's got to be better for the actors and their performances are obviously better for it, but it's got to be kind of fun to, like, feel like it's a collaborative sort of thing and there's something tangible there. Like, Jim Carrey is actually, like, sitting under this giant table, and so, like, I don't know, it's
there's a magic in the set, so that magic comes through in the camera.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think Michel Gondry is probably, like, the best recent example of a director who utilizes practical effects in an amazing way. Like, he's so good at that. The science of sleep, like, all that stuff. Like, he's doing so much of it in a practical sense, and that just adds to the movie. I think Jurassic Park Talking Point is really good. I was thinking about that as well. Also, again, to tease next week's episode, talking about Solo, I think when you have Phoebe Waller-Bridge on set, you know, kind of half in that costume of L3, but the rest in kind of the green suit, you're able to get that dynamic and that stuff that you just can't get in the recording booth. You know, like, they can kind of, like, banter back and forth. Same with K2SO in Rogue One. I forget that actor's name. But I just think if they're able to be on set interacting, it helps so much more. And I just think we're finally at a place where you can do that because, back in the day, it was just like a tennis ball and a pole, and that's hard to interact with. But now you can have the actors there. I think the whole movie, this is a horrible example, but I don't know, it just came to my mind. But, like, the whole movie Rango was done with all of them, like, kind of like in their green suits. And then they just, like, they made them all the characters in this animated movie. But to that extent, I think it kind of shows, like, their actual physical movements pretty well, you know, where it's not just, like, made up for the animation. But well, and I mean, I think I didn't really even realize this until we started talking about it, but I think you're spot on. I mean, there's the famous Ian McKellen quote when he went in to film The Hobbit and he cried because he was just in front of a green screen by himself talking to a tennis ball. And he said, this is not what acting is about. It's about actually reacting to the person opposite you, you know, in the scene. And I think it, like, going along with, like, what Ashley was saying for Eternal Sunshine, and, like, when you're Jim Carrey sitting under that giant table, like, that just feels fun and it feels real. So it's going to come through. So if you're having a real connection with someone, whether it's Rango or it's the Lord of the Rings, you know, that's going to come through. And I think we pick up on that, whether we know it or not. Like, you just know, you don't know why, but it just, there's a difference for sure.
Because it's real. There's a genuine connection there.
Have any of you guys seen the BBC series Extras with Ricky Gervais?
Episodes.
Have you seen the one with Ian McKellen? It's super funny. He get like the David Brent character goes to audition for a play, and Ian McKellen hands him a script. He's like, just so you're aware, you cannot have this script with you on stage. You have to memorize this. He's like, yeah, no, I know how it works. Like, again, you have to memorize all of this. You cannot read this on stage. Like, yeah, no, I get, like, it's, I don't know. I love that scene so much. And same with Patrick Stewart. That series is great.